Hey everybody, how's it going? Like Stan said, today we are going to be addressing a topic that seems to be on everyone's lips, and that is the subject of cancel culture. Now, many people, depending on what side of the political spectrum you are on, have a different definition of what that means. So, what I want to try and do is get down to a more scientific definition behind cancel culture. So I went to Wikipedia and I pulled up an article on cancel culture. And here's what it says. It says cancel culture or call out culture is a modern form of ostracism in which someone is thrust out of social or professional circles, whether it be online, on social media, or in person. Okay. Those who are subject to this ostracism are said to be, quote unquote, canceled. Now, in Webster's dictionary, it says that to cancel someone, as used in this particular context, means to stop giving support to that person, or stop patronizing their business or whatever. And in its sort of pop culture dictionary definition, it's sort of withdrawing support for or canceling public figures and or companies after they've said or done something that is considered objectionable or otherwise offensive. The expression cancel culture, according to the article here, it has mostly negative connotations and is commonly used in debates on free speech and censorship. It goes on to talk about sort of what the term, how it started and what it looks like. And then they actually go on a little further and talk about the origin of cancel culture. There's a social psychologist by the name of Jonathan Haidt, and he said that cancel culture or call out culture arises from what he calls safetyism on college campuses. So in other words, on college campuses, people wanted to feel safe, meaning they wanted to be free from hearing or experiencing anything that they might feel is offensive. Now, the problem with that is this. Part of the cost of living in a free and open society is relinquishing the right to live an unoffended life. I need to say that again. Part of the cost of living in a free and open society is relinquishing, giving up the right to live an unoffended life. That means if everybody can think or feel or do as they wish because it's a quote unquote free country, that means that we have to be prepared to not only hear things that we don't agree with, but at times be offended. And furthermore, if we are truly all about freedom, we need to be able to defend the person's right to say what they're saying, even if we hate what they're saying. But see, that's not what this idea of safetyism that arose on college campuses was about. It was about feeling safe. You heard the term safe spaces. I mean, they literally created these safe spaces on college campuses where if people felt bad or were feeling offended or felt somehow hurt by something that they heard, a different political opinion or whatever, they could go into this safe space and find some sort of relief or healing. Now, I have many opinions about how this arose or why this arose, but to be frank, I believe that we have created a generation of people who melt like hot butter the minute they experience any sort of resistance in life. We all grew up dealing with bullies, dealing with tough things in life, and we had to figure out a way to navigate that other than just doing away with it, because sometimes that wasn't an option. But now that's the only option. They want to do away with everything, and that's sort of where this safetyism sort of on colleges campuses came from. According to the article, it says Keith Hampton, professor of media studies at Michigan State University, said that the practice contributes to the polarization of American society, but it does not lead to changes in opinion. So here's the interesting thing. Cancel culture definitely contributes to the polarization that we see taking place. We see more people diametrically opposed to one another and on different sides of the spectrum than we've ever seen maybe in our lifetime. And the interesting thing about that is if you really get to know somebody who might be a liberal and you're a conservative, or might be a conservative and you're a liberal, and you just sit down and talk to them just on a human level, heart to heart, what you'll often find is that we have more in common than we do not. We have more in common than we do not. And what you'll find is that in the past, we were able to listen to somebody's opinion and try and understand why they had that opinion, so that you wouldn't form any sort of prejudgments. That's where the word prejudice comes from, right? You wouldn't hate somebody simply because they held a specific opinion and assume that they were bad people. You would give people the benefit of the doubt and get to know them, right? But that's changed with cancel culture. And so it's contributed to this polarization that we see in American society. But here's the big thing. Cancel culture doesn't change anybody's opinion. Nobody is like, wow, cancel culture is a thing. Maybe I better rethink my position on abortion or whatever, right? So the article continues and says, some students are afraid to express unpopular opinions for fear of being called out on social media and may avoid asking questions as a result. Call out culture's prevalence can make marginalized groups feel even more hesitant to speak out for what they feel is right. So if you're, for example, in a group and you're in the minority when it comes to a certain perspective, you'll be less likely to voice that opinion. And what happens? Conversation can't happen. See, the free exchange of ideas is how we grow. To assume that just because you believe a certain thing, that you are morally and intellectually superior than all those who disagree is the height of hubris, right? That is pure arrogance. The only way that we can grow is by a free exchange of ideas. But if certain people are afraid to share their ideas because they're in the minority, well, then that's not going to take place. You see, because it becomes very dangerous in a cancel culture society to exchange these ideas. And here's the thing. If what you believe is true, you should be able to have a conversation with somebody who challenges your opinions. And that's okay, because the truth can always stand up under investigation. Only lies cannot stand up under scrutiny, but the truth can always stand up under investigation. But guess what? When those conversations don't happen, there's no way to really arrive at any sort of opinion for sure, because it's never been challenged, right? So that's what they're talking about. It says here, cancel culture has also been described by different media study scholars as a collective of typically marginalized voices calling out and emphatically expressing censure of a powerful figure. And in essence, they're saying that there's some good to cancel culture. Well, here's the thing. The original intent of cancel culture may have been to sort of band together and hold powerful people accountable, certain companies doing something wrong, maybe having sweatshops in third world countries, or certain political figures, right? But it doesn't just end there. Then it becomes, celebrities, and then it becomes college professors and teachers, and then it becomes just your average person. All of a sudden, it trickles down, and more, if you have an opinion, it doesn't matter whether or not you're a public figure or not. If you have an opinion that doesn't jive with the political correctness of the day, you are in danger of getting canceled. So, even though there were maybe good intentions behind the whole cancel culture phenomenon, as they say, good intentions pave the road to hell. A couple of silly examples of cancel culture. There's an actor by the name of Sebastian Stan, and Sebastian Stan was canceled. He's the actor. He played in some Marvel movies. He plays the character Winter Soldier, I believe. And he was canceled not because of anything he did, but he was canceled because of his girlfriend. So some time ago, his girlfriend posted a picture of her and her friend dressed as geishas. And the caption was Asian night. Now, his girlfriend and her friend weren't Asian, right? Sebastian Stan commented on the image, but people were upset at Sebastian Stan, not because he said anything that was inappropriate, rude, or racist in any sort of way, but because he did not mention that what they were doing was cultural appropriation. How dare he? You see, that is a little silly, right? But that's literally what happened. So all these people started attacking him, and so he started to block some people who were posting really negative and nasty comments. And then all of a sudden, this hashtag emerges: Sebastian Stan is over party. That's a thing. Whenever they want to cancel somebody, they just start this hashtag going, saying, Joe Blow is over party. So that's what they did to him. One prominent example is a woman by the name of Gina Carano. Gina Carano, I wasn't familiar with her political perspectives until recently, but it appears that she may be sort of a conservative. She's never, as far as I know, she's never come out and said exactly what her beliefs were, but maybe she did not. I just haven't figured it out yet. But what she did was she posted a picture on her Twitter account, and it was a picture of a Jewish woman in Nazi Germany. She was being attacked and chased by some German teenagers, and they were clearly beating her up. And what she said was, she said, what we don't understand about history, because it's edited, is that the Nazis didn't just go into Nazi Germany and start arresting Jews. What they first did was they had to create a campaign to make people hate and despise Jews, right? And eventually, when they came time to round them up and take them away to concentration camps and death camps and things like that, there was nobody to stand up and defend them, right? And so what she said is, how is that any different from hating somebody for one of their an opinion or one of their political beliefs? And she was just asking a question. It was a rhetorical question, obviously, but there was nothing anti-Semitic about it. There was nothing, as far as I could see, there was nothing morally wrong with what she did. She was trying to make a point, and she wasn't in any way trivializing the plight or the experience of Jews who were murdered in Nazi Germany in the Holocaust. It's not at all what she was doing. She was actually, if anything, she was saying that, that what they're experiencing, it was actually worse than we knew it to be, So but again, what happens? People take it and run with it, and all of a sudden, the headlines read: Gina Carano makes anti-Semitic statement, and boom, she's fired from her TV show, and that's that. That's where we're at right now, and the thing is the way we look at people now is there is no room to make mistakes. There's no room to be flawed. Trust me when I say, many of our heroes from the past, if we had social media, if we had Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and things like that in the past, they would have been canceled too, right? But here we are in today's day and age, and we're expecting ideological purity and nothing less. We want flawless heroes who are perfect and make no mistakes. They say all the right things because those are the most comfortable kind for people who are easily offended. And I'll go on to say this: some people like to be offended. And what do I mean by that? Some people feel like they are morally and intellectually superior if they are offended by everything. And so it's almost become like a sport to be offended. It's really silly. But if you look at, for example, if you're a Christian, I've run into Christians who are okay with cancel culture, and I'm like, have you read the Bible before? Like, have you ever read about David? Or any of these? There's a lot of characters in the Bible with checkered past, and yet they hold them in very high regard. But guess what? If David was alive today, King David would have been canceled by today's standards. But I guess if you really look at it, there can be pros and cons to cancel culture if you try to look at it in a pragmatic way. if you look at cancel culture in its best intentions, what it's doing is it's seeking to kind of expose and hold those in the public eye, especially people in power, accountable for wrongs that they've done, both in the past and in the present. The Bible tells Bible believers and Christians that to seek justice, and that we should judge both the poor and the great alike. But it's very important that we differentiate the difference between genuine efforts to hold people accountable for wrongs and evils that they may have committed from many of the immoral elements of cancel culture. Many of the immoral elements of cancel culture. That's what we're talking about. There's nothing wrong with holding somebody accountable for something that they've done wrong, but there are many immoral elements of cancel culture, and that's the problem. That's what we're talking about. There is a very dark side to cancel culture. And we've talked about that briefly, but we're going to go into it a little bit more deeply. So there are several problems with cancel culture, and we're going to outline that. And as a Christian, we should be looking at this really in a self-reflective way because it affects us. The first problem is that cancel culture is reactionary, it's quick to judge, and it's quick to anger, right? So a lot of times you'll see like a short video clip and all of a sudden people will lose it, right? And then somehow the full video clip appears online and you see what happened in context and you realize that what you saw in that particular moment in that original short video clip wasn't the full story. And now you see things a little bit differently. But the way cancel culture works is the short video comes out, oftentimes it's edited and people just lose it, right? Sometimes a confidential letter that two parties will read, may have sent to one another will get revealed, or maybe somebody's personal testimony goes viral. They talk about a horrible experience they had with somebody, and usually it's without context and without hearing the other person's side of the story. And then all of a sudden, within hours, the public's already formed an opinion about the person or the events that were being told based on only selective evidence, right? In the book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verse 17, it says that essentially those who, the one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him, right? Oftentimes what appears to be like a grave injustice in this horrible act is not really as clear when you start to really do further investigation and examination. And that's why the Bible tells us not to be reactionary, quick to judge and quick to anger. The Bible actually says to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, and not to jump to conclusions. If you look up James chapter 1, verse 19. So the Bible actually has some very interesting principles on how to deal with the temptation to partake in cancel culture. And really, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're an atheist or a Christian, you can use these because these principles are very pragmatic. This has nothing to do with, a religious persuasion or belief. This is just, there's a principle that Jesus spoke of in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7. And he said, do unto others as you would want done unto yourself. That's called the golden rule. Now, whether you're a Christian or an atheist or anywhere in between, that's just good, solid life principles. You treat others the way you want to be treated. And so in this particular context, this is just a good, solid life principle. Don't be reactionary, quick to judge and quick to anger. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, and not jump to conclusions. Do your homework, do your investigation, because oftentimes when you do further investigation, you find out that the sensationalized headline or the little clip that you read or whatever is out of context, or there's more to the story. Another problem with cancel culture is that cancel culture can be very vindictive, and it can seek to take the matter of justice into its own hands. Here's the reality. We live in a fallen world and justice isn't perfect. And oftentimes the powerful, the rich, people who are super well connected can skew justice in their favor so that they're not held accountable as they should be, right? And when we see this, we can legitimately and rightly be upset with that. We can mourn the fact that this is wrong. But that being said, we shouldn't be so quick to go out and take vengeance on people and be vindictive and take justice into our own hands. And the reason why is because, well, I'll give you a biblical example, right? The Bible says in Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, it says, "For God is not mocked, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." But if you take that into a worldly sense, right? Life is cyclical. Life has a way of meting out consequences to those who do wrong things. They say something like, the people that you step on your way to the top are going to be the same people that you meet on your way back down, because life is cyclical. And I cannot tell you how many times in life that I've seen people, when they were high on the hog, treating people that were below them or not in their same position very terribly. And one day they got their comeuppance. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but at some point they got their comeuppance. And that's kind of what we have to remember, is that, and here's the other thing. One of the other reasons why it's important for us not to take vengeance into our own hands is because oftentimes it's really tough for us to know the whole story, right? So there have been times where people have gone and well, let's give you an example. This may be a very dark example from our nation's past, but Emmett Till, we all know about this young man. He was visiting his family in the South. He was from, somewhere, I believe, somewhere around Chicago or somewhere up north. And he was in the South visiting his family. And a white woman claimed that he had somehow whistled at her or said something crass or salacious to her, something to that effect. And she went and told her husband and her brother or some family members, and they went, busted into the house, dragged the young man out of bed, beat him to death. Okay, beat him to death. And it turns out that just recently, I mean, within the last few years, this woman was essentially on her deathbed or close to dying, and she confessed that she had lied about the whole thing. So these men went out and murdered this child based on a lie. And sometimes that's what happens when we are too quick to react without actually looking for evidence and information to substantiate the claims. And that's what cancel culture doesn't do. It takes seeking justice and vindication and punishment into our own hands. And when we don't have the whole story, sometimes we need to have a little bit, we need to reserve judgment. Another issue with cancel culture is that cancel culture relies on mob justice. Okay. Now, even though our justice system it's slow, and it may be frustrating when people have committed a horrible crime and we want to see them, sentenced and punished for that crime. One of the benefits of our judicial system is that it sort of allows passions to kind of die down and cool a little bit. And cooler heads prevail. It allows for evidence from both sides, both the plaintiff and the defendant, to be heard in a court of law and hopefully evaluated in an objective manner, right? But the type of mob justice that often happens when you see cancel culture happening on social media, it's less pragmatic and logical, and it's more based on just emotional reactions than just judging purely based on all the facts. And again, if you look at the Bible, the Bible has principles in the Bible telling us to not do that. And when you look at the way that the crowd treated Jesus Christ, right? The crowd murdered Jesus Christ, crucified him on a cross, and then sometime later, Peter, and in the book of Acts chapter 2, is preaching and tells them about Jesus, and he says, and you murdered him. And it says that they were pricked in their hearts, and they said, what can we do to be saved? Like they were sincerely repent, but it was too late. right? It was too late. So being, we have to remember, just because the majority of people are angry or feel a certain way doesn't necessarily mean they are right. And that's why it's important for us to hear all the facts, to not immediately just be so quick to judge somebody. Wait till all the facts comes out, gather information, do our homework, and then formulate an opinion based on the weight of the evidence. And oftentimes you're going to get better results out of that. Now, another problem with cancel culture is that cancel culture, if you look at the consequences, oftentimes they're disproportionate to the offense committed. So, for example, somebody could have tweeted something 10 years ago or whatever. They may have done some sort of, maybe something stupid when they were teenagers, or dressed in blackface while they were in high school. And maybe they dressed up as Michael Jackson or Mr. T or whatever. Anyway, this is caught on camera, and now there's real world consequences, right? People have lost jobs, they've lost their roles on prominent shows, they've been ostracized socially, and have even received death threats for a tweet. The one famous example that happened recently within the last few years is with a comedian by the name of Kevin Hart. And apparently Kevin Hart told a joke that was offensive to the LGBTQ plus community. And it was a 10-year-old joke, but this resurfaced somehow. And he was supposed to host the Oscars, right? Now, I don't know Kevin Hart. I don't know anything about him. I don't really follow his work or his comedy. I just know that he's a public figure and I read a lot, so I come across these articles and things like that. But apparently he lost his gig at the Oscars because of something that happened 10 years ago. It's a joke that he told 10 years ago. And, the problem with that is that people grow, people change, right? What cancel culture doesn't do is it doesn't give people the opportunity for growth, or it doesn't ask, do you still feel the same way? It's like, no, you did this. This is who you are. You're a monster. And so a lot of times people lose, jobs, and they lose their ability to their careers. Their careers are ruined. They lose their ability to feed themselves and take care of their families, all because of something that happened 10 years ago. But here's the crazy part. People will go back in time, find things that you did or said that may have been socially acceptable at the time, and judge them by today's standard. That's dangerous. Because I guarantee you, all of us, Christian or not, has said something regrettable in our past that we hope nobody ever finds out about. We can all be canceled. If everybody looked into the deepest, darkest corners of our past, our history, our hearts, we can all be canceled, right? And so here's where the golden rule comes into play. Okay, so if you want to be so quick to judge people and to cancel people for things that they may have said or done in the past, right? We have to understand that could be knocking on your door soon. There's another problem with cancel culture, and I've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but here's the problem. Cancel culture is unforgiving, and there is zero grace and mercy in cancel culture. And the problem with cancel culture is that there's very little in the way of forgiveness and repentance. If you are a felon, a criminal, and you have, let's say, murdered somebody, God forbid, or done something horrible, oftentimes you can go to jail, be quote unquote rehabilitated, and then released from jail even after committing and admitting to committing a horrible crime, and you are rehabilitated and allowed back into society. Eventually you'll get back your right to vote and things of that nature, but there's an opportunity for redemption for people who have committed criminal offenses. But in cancel culture, say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, and you may never come back from that. And it's interesting because, like I said, I often find Christians who seem to be okay with the idea of cancel culture. And I find it very strange, because that is completely the antithesis of everything that Jesus Christ, who they claim to worship and love, came to represent. Jesus came so that our sins could be forgiven, not to cancel us, right? One of my favorite verses in the Bible says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved, right? Jesus didn't come to condemn or cancel. He came to do the opposite. He came with an opportunity for redemption. He's our redeemer. But cancel culture, there is no redemption, right? If you do something, the whole of your existence is judged by that one moment in time. Can you imagine if we took King David and we judged King David all based on that one horrible mistake that he made by taking Uriah's wife and sleeping with her and doing what he did? Can you imagine that? But guess what? King David repented. And with cancel culture, it doesn't give us the opportunity for repentance. And we have to be very careful with that, because here's the thing about cancel culture. The standards of cancel culture are constantly changing. So right now, you may be politically correct, but pretty soon, what you believe and what you feel may become politically incorrect. And it may no longer be politically expedient to hold these opinions. And guess what? Cancel culture comes to you. And when it finally comes to you, it's not so fun. There are people who are going after people and canceling people left and right. And all of a sudden, the tables were turned on them because of something they said or did. And they said, whoa, this is not fun. It's never fun when it happens to you, right? So it's fun canceling, but it's not fun getting canceled. So, what we have to realize about cancel culture is, while it may have started with good intentions pave the road to hell. Cancel culture oftentimes is pure, unadulterated cyber online bullying, right? It's bullying. That's what it is. And I never did like bullies personally, but it's about control. It's about telling you how to think, what to say, how to feel. And if you dare step outside of unapproved thought, well, then you're a problem, right? Then you're a problem. You know what the craziest part about cancel culture is? A lot of people are getting canceled who don't deserve to be canceled. And then you see prominent people like Joe Biden, for example. Joe Biden can tell me as a black man that if I don't vote for him, that I'm not black. No problem. George Bush can be a war criminal, but now he's doing the talk show circuit, right? So people who maybe by today's standards should get canceled sometimes don't if they're liked enough by the people who are doing the canceling. So it doesn't really make sense. There's oftentimes a lot of double standards and it doesn't make sense. So we should all tread lightly when it comes to cancel culture, because if we don't, it is coming to our doorstep very, very soon. Interestingly enough, the Bible has people who were canceled. You know who was canceled in the Bible? John the Baptist. John the Baptist was this preacher who was blunt. He was unyielding. He was fiercely truthful, and he spoke the truth, and he didn't care who heard it and who was upset by it. He just said what he felt. Okay, and guess what? It cost him his life. Right? First, he was thrown in jail. He was silenced. And then they literally cut his head off, right? That's where you get the term, oh, I want so-and-so's head on a platter. Guess what? They literally brought John the Baptist's head to King Herod on a platter. But when you tear out a man's tongue, you're not proving him to be wrong. You're only telling the world that you're afraid of what he has to say. That's the problem with cancel culture. But here's the bigger thing. Where is this headed? What is with this sort of proliferation of this thing called cancel culture? See, what we don't understand is that we are seeing very big changes in our society that have been happening incrementally for a very long time. And it's kind of like boiling the frog in a pot of water. If you just put a frog in a pot of boiling water, obviously the frog will jump out. But if you put the frog in some lukewarm water and then you slowly, incrementally turn up the heat, the frog will stay in the water until the heat cooks the frog, right? And he gets boiled to death. And so that's essentially what we're seeing happening in our society. You see, we used to be this country that was fiercely independent. And we had these documents called the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights. And we loved those documents because of the freedom that it represented for us as US citizens. And we were considered by the world over as the greatest country in the world because of this. But slowly we have been seeing this change towards now it's not okay to think certain ways. It's not okay to have certain opinions. And you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of everything that I used to be told about communism. Okay. And how do I know this? Because my mother is from Nicaragua, and a socialist communist regime overtook Nicaragua and in the late 70s. And so having that experience under socialism and communism, we understand that there were certain things that you couldn't say. There were certain things that you couldn't do. And it became very dangerous. You see, but what we have to understand is that the free exchange of information and ideas is the literal lifeblood of any free or liberal society. And that is becoming constricted by the day. And the more you constrict free society through cancel culture, whether it's you canceling somebody because they've said something and censoring them, or somebody self-censoring because they're afraid to speak their mind for fear of what the consequences might be, it's still having the same result. And that is that we are losing liberty, because the free exchange of information and ideas is the lifeblood of a free and liberated society. And where is this heading? Where is this heading when there is such a thing as unthinkable thoughts or opinions that will get you labeled as a racist or a Nazi or a white supremacist just for having them, right? There's no more conversation. If you think certain ways, if you support a political candidate over here or over there, you're this, that, or the other. There's no getting to know you as a person. It's really strange. And God help you if you're an educator. I mean, as a college professor, I have to think about everything that's coming out of my mouth to think about whether or not it could be construed as something that is going to be used against me. Because nobody comes up to you anymore and says, hey, what did you mean by that? Nobody says, hey, I was a little offended by something that you said and I just wanted to get some clarity. There's no opportunity for conversation. It is just, oh, he said this, he's horrible, cancel. And that's kind of where we go. And I'll end with this, but you all need to do research into this. But in China, which is a communist totalitarian society, they have something called a social credit system. And what that means is, that means you get points for everything you do that's good, and you get points taken away from everything that you do that's bad. If you say something wrong online or verbally, that you get points taken away. If you do something good, quote unquote, they give you points. And if you lose enough points, you're not able to travel. If you lose enough points, there's all kinds of negative things that could happen to you in life in China. And it's all based on you acting according to what somebody else, some diplomat, some politician thinks is good and right. That's how you control a whole society. And guess what? If we don't cancel culture, we're headed in the same direction. You say that could never happen here because we have a constitution and we have the Bill of Rights. But guess what? They are trying to repudiate the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as we speak. So this is a very deep subject. I want to get into the psychology behind this a lot more much later, but for now we'll leave it at that. And I want to thank you all for being here during the presentation. I hope that you think about this, especially if you're a Christian. If you're a Christian, cancel culture has no place for a Christian, because Christianity and Jesus is about forgiveness and about redemption. And I hope that we're all willing to extend redemption and an opportunity for forgiveness to anybody who offends us, whether they're on this side of the aisle or the other. So I hope you all enjoyed the presentation, and I'll see you back next time.